Hello, friends. Welcome back to my second podcast episode. I am Chrissy, your host here, and I'm so excited to be doing this. It's just this is such a win for me, and the fact that I could even figure out the technology was fucking insane because I'm not tech savvy at all. So here I am. On this episode, I'm going to go into a little bit of my story because this is called the journey to happiness. So we need to talk about that journey, right? And how do we get from point A to point B? And so to start that story, I think we need to talk a little bit about trauma. And that's why I'm about to share my story because I feel like a lot of people look at trauma as like this big super thing, right? Like you had to be abused or be in a plane crash or rape or physical abuse or a pandemic. I mean, we've all kind of been through trauma with the pandemic. But I feel like that is one of the things that people just, you hear the word trauma and you just automatically assume it has to be these big life altering situations. And that's not the case. We all have it. We all have trauma in our lives. We all have childhood trauma. And a lot of this can be referred to as big T and little T trauma. So big T trauma is the things I just mentioned, the plane crashes, the abuse as a child, the big pandemics, all of those things that can be attributed to like what they call big T trauma. But you also have little T trauma. And little T trauma is things that are so little that people, especially our caregivers, don't really think about them. So these can actually sometimes be worse because, at least with the big T traumas, oftentimes we get help for those because we kind of already know. Like I had this big, amazing, like not amazing, not trauma's not amazing, but these big T like issues that have happened to me with the little stuff, we don't think about it, because it can literally be as small as being bullied on a playground. It can be so tiny that we don't realize we have trauma. And this was me for, I literally didn't think that I had trauma up until a couple years ago because I grew up in it was kind of the all-American dream household in a way, from the outside looking in. It wasn't all rainbows and butterflies or anything, but from the outside, I was an only child. I was kind of spoiled. I had two parents who stayed together until she was 18. They loved each other. Well, the love had kind of dissipated in the later stages, but I didn't know that. I had no clue. So this was something that when I started learning about trauma and trying to heal, I didn't realize I had anything to heal from because in my eyes, I had had this really good childhood. A lot of my friends went through a lot of, they had parents who had addictions, mental health issues, single parent households, and I didn't have any of that. So for me, I just thought, well, my trauma is not as big as theirs. Like, what do I have to heal from? My trauma is not big like theirs is, so I should be okay. But that's not the case. And I had to finally learn to accept that I also had childhood trauma. And I think the other thing when we talk about childhood trauma is we think that if we admit that we have that we are somehow diminishing our parents, that our parents are somehow not good because they caused childhood trauma or something crazy like that, right? That's not the case either because, especially up until now, I think now a lot of parents are starting to catch on and raising their children differently. But I mean, hell, we just started talking about trauma as a society in the last, 5 to 10 years. So anybody who grew up at the same age as me, who I'm 44 now, and even people who are in their 30s, like we had parents who they were doing the best they could. They were doing the best with the information that they had. And they didn't know any better. And they were just out there trying to make ends meet too. And the other thing is we think that our parents are kind of like godlike. When we're children, we internalize it all. And so we think our parents can do no wrong. And if something happens, we think it's our fault. A father leaves, a parent gets divorced, a parent's in and out of the hospital. All of that stuff can cause these issues within ourselves because we internalize it and we think it's our fault somehow. So that leads into a little bit of my story because, like I said, I I didn't have these big childhood traumas, but what I did have is I had a mother who was very codependent. I had a mother who was very people pleasing and she wanted to take care of everybody else. I had a father who let that happen and who worked a lot, and he worked a lot of swing shifts. And so I was somebody as a child who I'll never forget. Like my dad, one of the biggest vivid memories I have is him telling me that we were going to go to a haunted house one time. We were going to go to this haunted house, and I was so excited all day long about going to this haunted house because that was like my thing. I love Halloween, and that was kind of our always our holiday together. And I remember him deciding that we weren't going to go. And it was something to do with either there was like a ball game on or he had been working a lot and he was too tired. It was like something small like that. And I remember crying by the back door. I just remember like bawling my eyes out and just feeling like I was not good enough for someone to keep a promise to. And this happened multiple times throughout my childhood. God love my parents. Like they are the cream of the crop. They are amazing. They have been the best grandparents. But they had their own shit when I was growing up. And the other thing about this too is as children, we pick up on things. So sometimes our parents don't realize that they think that we just aren't aware of what's happening. But sometimes we pick up on the energy, right? We pick up on the energy of how they are. And I know my mom wasn't happy. For many years, my mom was not happy. Neither one of them, I think, were very happy for many, many years. And as a child, I'm sure I picked up on that. But back to the story with my dad, promising me we're going to do these things and not doing them. I grew up with this belief that men couldn't be trusted, and I grew up with this belief that I was not good enough for somebody to keep plans with, for somebody to keep a promise to. And for the longest time, again, I pushed away this trauma. I pushed it away because I felt like, I wasn't abused, I wasn't beat. I pretty much had everything I could have wanted. And so in my eyes, well, my trauma wasn't as big as anybody else's. So what do I have to complain about? And that wasn't the case. I had to heal this within myself. I grew up being very anxious attached, which is just attachment issues are, I'll have to go into those later. I don't have enough time right now, but it's just the way that we form attachments with other adults in our lives and other relationships. And I grew up with that, and that stems from inconsistent parenting. So that was a big part of my life. And so what did I do? I ended up dating men who were never going to be available for me. They were I dated the worst men ever. It was crazy. And I remember everybody in my life was always like, oh, like it was just like the going thing, like, oh, Chrissy dates bad men. Like she can't get a good guy. And it was because I was attracting what I believed on the inside. So your brain wants to prove to you that your beliefs are true. So my belief was that men couldn't be trusted, that I wasn't worthy for somebody to keep a promise to. So there in turn, I was meeting the same guy over and over and over who, just never wanted to keep a promise to me, never wanted to keep plans with me, or, they wanted to keep me hidden, or they just always made me feel unworthy. And not that they were bad or anything, but I was the world is a mirror. It's just a mirror looking back at us. So that went on for so many years. And it wasn't until I was turning 40. And of course, along the way, I guess I'm skipping some steps here, but I did have some children along the way. I used to, through all of these relationships, I eventually got into drugs. I got into drugs. I hear these women and these men now who are very young, like in their early 20s, who are on this spiritual journey. And I'm just like, holy hell. Like, I was just worried about what drug I could snort up my nose at 18 or 19 years old. I wasn't worried about spirituality. I wasn't worried about anything. I just cared about what buzz I could get for that day. And so, I got into some drugs pretty heavy. Thankfully, we didn't have the things around that we have now because I probably would have been worse off. And eventually I got pregnant by a drug dealer, and it changed my life. It changed my life. I mean, he saved my life. I think God knew I was on a path of destruction, and my first child saved my life. And I have no doubt about that. God gave him to me. because, I was just down a bad path. And so that led to eventually I had a couple more kids, all with different men. Again, just because this whole time I was just looking for love. I was looking for everything outside of myself to make me feel whole, to make me feel wanted, to make me feel loved. Because my entire dream growing up as a child was just to find Prince Charming and get married and have a family. And so that's what I was trying to do, but I was meeting the wrong kind of guys because I didn't know how to work on myself. I had no personal development skills. I had no I believed in God and I was like considered myself a Christian, but I had I had no clue. Like I hadn't had a spiritual awakening. I hadn't did any personal healing. I just didn't know how. Of course, back then, you're talking, close to 20 years ago, it wasn't even talked about. So therapy was kind of even therapy was like a hush hush thing. So I didn't know. And so I had three children and continued to raise them, and I would continue to meet the same kind of guys. And eventually, when I was getting close to 40, we had a pandemic. And as many other people, I ended up starting to wake up. Of course, the universe had to like hit me over the head to get me to completely wake up because I continued to run. I continued to drink a lot. And not that that's really bad or anything. I mean, I wasn't doing like hard drugs or anything, but it was just for me, it was just me what's the word I'm looking for? Checking out. I was checking out of my life still. And the pandemic happened. And at the time, I had to stay with my mom. I was staying with my mom because my house, long story, but long story short here, my house had gotten broken into that I was renting and it had got destroyed. I had to move in with my mom, with my three children. And the pandemic happened. And I continued to try and outrun my feelings. I continued to try and check out of my life. And eventually I had to wake up. Eventually it got to a point where I was spiraling out of control and I was a bitch. Like I was not a good person. I was, snapping at people. I had so much anxiety inside of me. And I was just completely stuck in this fight or flight mode, completely stuck in it. And I finally realized, like, holy shit, like, what's happening? And one day I just, it hit me that I had had what they call a spiritual awakening, which I'll go into in later episodes. If you found this podcast, you probably already know what a spiritual awakening is. But if not, I will talk about it later on. But it's basically just a remembrance of who you are. And that led me on a journey of self-discovery, on a journey of figuring out who the hell I am, which I'm still figuring out because we're always growing and learning. And I realized like the purpose of life, and or at least I'm starting to realize the purpose of life and the purpose of soul contracts and the purpose of relationships. And I finally found my happy place, for the first time in my life. Uh, this year, I can say for the first time in my life, I'm truly happy. I'm truly happy with who I am. And I'm completely on my own. There's no relationships. There's not even a huge friend group anymore. It's just me and my children and my parents who I love so much. And I'm so happy. Normally this time of the year, it's right now when I'm recording, it's January. So we just had Christmas a couple weeks ago. And normally this time of the year, I'm very depressed. I have a lot of seasonal depression within me. And usually after Christmas, I get very depressed. And this year I'm not. This year I'm super happy. And we got a blizzard outside right now, by the way. It's like our first fucking blizzard that we've had in probably quite a few years. It's like we've got like 10 inches of snow here in Southeast Ohio. But I'm happy. I'm truly happy. And it took me a long time to get here. And I just wanted to tell you guys a little bit of my story. So there's going to be more to come along. I'm sure you guys are all wondering, how the hell did I get here? How did I get to such a happy place? And we're going to talk about that in later episodes because it's not easy. It's not easy to finally understand that you don't need anybody else on the outside to make you happy. All you need is what you have. It's already inside of you. It's already inside of you. But it takes a while to recognize that and to recognize that life is just a journey. and we're all on it together. And we can truly be happy. And we all have a unique version of what happiness means to us. To me, it means just peace and joy. And it means no matter what is happening on the outside of me, I can feel happiness on the inside. And since I've started realizing this, and since I've started on this journey to happiness, I can tell you that the outside world is starting to reflect things back to me. It's starting to reflect abundance back to me. It's starting to reflect love back to me. The universe is bringing people into my life I never would have expected to meet. And it's because the world is a mirror and it reflects back to us what we feel on the inside. So that's my story for today. And so I hope you enjoyed it. I know it was a very shortened version. I'm still growing. I'm still learning. I'm still figuring out things that work. I'm starting to get into yoga recently. Like that's kind of my new thing is like getting into yoga and kind of getting my body back into a good physical shape because I'm really out of shape right now. That's going to be part of my journey that I'm going on is because I've gained a lot of weight in the last year through this process, but I'm confident that I'm getting my health back in check through my eating habits and through my physical activity. So, um, yeah, so I hope this resonated with you guys. And I think that's all I have to say for today. But I love you all so much. Please subscribe to this podcast if you like what you hear so far and leave a review because it lets me know like what you think and it helps other people also find this podcast too. So stay tuned for more information. We have a lot of really exciting things coming up. Some really exciting guests that I think is going to be very beneficial for you guys to hear. So until next time, I love you so much. Have a wonderful day. Mwah.